for the afternoon. And now to live coverage of the U.S. Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I rise to follow on the majority leader's bringing this legislation to the floor, which I'm privileged to sponsor with a whole host of my colleagues, and really to speak out for taxpayers and against continuing to provide subsidies to multi-billion-dollar big oil companies. And we're talking about the Big Five. We're not talking about any other entity, just the Big Five. A vote on my bill presents, a positive vote on my bill presents a simple choice for everyone in this chamber. Are you on the side of working-class families, or are you on the side of big oil? There are lots of ways to cut the deficit. Many of our colleagues, particularly in the other body, they want to end Medicare and cut student loan programs. What I and my co-sponsors want to do is end wasteful oil tax breaks for a wealthy industry that does not need them. Now, Mr. President, clearly we all need to tighten our belts to help address the deficit, all of us, even the oil companies. We all know that oil companies are among the largest, most profitable companies in the world, but sometimes it's hard to understand the true scale of their wealth. So this chart is an attempt, just a simple attempt, to give some perspective. You know, the median income in the United States is about $50,000. ExxonMobil, just one of these Big Five, is projected to earn in profits $42.6 billion this year. $42.6 billion. Now, it's impossible to show this disparity on a chart, but if this chart were to scale and each bundle of money equaled 50,000, then we would need more than 850,000 stacks of bills to equal ExxonMobil's profits over the next year. 850,000 stacks of bills on this poster would be about 170,000 feet high, or about 32.2 miles straight up through the ceiling of this chamber and beyond the stratosphere. Now, the printing and graphics department is very good here at the Senate, but 32 miles of posters was probably a bit much, so I decided not to do that. And I appreciate the parliamentarian acknowledging that I shouldn't have done that. Mr. President, my bill would close several loopholes for big oil, loopholes that, given the current budget climate, would let big oil get away without making any sacrifices at the very time we're asking middle-class families, the disabled and the elderly, to tighten their belts and help reduce the deficit. There simply is no common-sense explanation for balancing the budget on the backs of working families and letting multi-billion-dollar oil companies keep billions in taxpayer dollars. Now, I know that at the same time that the median income is $50,000 for Americans, here's what it is if you're a CEO of one of the big oil companies. In last year alone, the CEO of ExxonMobil got paid $29 million. The ConocoPhillips CEO got paid last year about $18 million. Chevron about $16 million. Most Americans will never see that in their lifetime of work. And so to have these executives come last week before the Finance Committee and say, as some of them, one of them, their companies put out, that the suggestion about taking away some, not all, some of their tax subsidies was un-American is pretty outrageous. Let me explain two provisions of my proposal. The first provision has to do with foreign tax credits. U.S. taxpayers are taxed on their income worldwide, but they're entitled to a dollar-for-dollar tax credit for any income taxes that are paid to a foreign government. They get that taken off here. Makes sense because you don't want to tax the same activity twice. But U.S. oil and gas companies have pretty smart lawyers and clever accountants. They have figured out that if you can convince a foreign government like Indonesia to charge you taxes instead of a royalty, which is in essence a fee that you pay for the purposes of drawing that oil out of that country, that they can get a big break on their U.S. taxes. But what this amounts to is that the United States taxpayer is subsidizing foreign oil production. This bill would close that loophole and return $6.5 billion to the Treasury. Another one. In 2004, Congress created the domestic manufacturing tax deduction. It was designed to help U.S. manufacturers who export a product to a foreign market. So cars, iPhones, iPads, all of that. Well, few would really see the extraction of oil from the ground as manufacturing. But again, big oil's lobbyists earned their money. They saw an opportunity, some made phone calls, and lo and behold, according to the tax code, oil companies are in the manufacturing business. This legislation closes that loophole and saves taxpayers almost $13 billion. That would be $13 billion more towards deficit reduction. Now, the American people understand this bill. They understand that big oil makes enormous profits, and there's nothing wrong with making profits, by the way, but they don't need to have our tax dollars in order for them to make those profits. They understand that big oil does not need taxpayer subsidies, and they understand that if big oil wants to lower gasoline prices, they could put a lot less money in stock buybacks and a lot more in lowering prices or producing more oil. But in order to combat this straightforward, common-sense bill that even the Cato Institute supports, big oil and its supporters have come up with some pretty strange rhetoric. The strangest by far, as I alluded to before, is suggesting that those who support cutting these wasteful subsidies are un-American. Seems to me when a company stoops so low as to question the patriotism of those who would suggest that, you know what, maybe you can do without $21 billion in taxpayer subsidies when you're going to make anywhere between $125 billion in profits, not proceeds, profits, to $140-some-odd billion. To question the patriotism of those who suggest you don't need a further taxpayer subsidy is really to suggest you don't have very good arguments on your side. Charge of un-American is outrageous. And I think the 74% of Americans who support ending oil subsidies know they are more American than that point of view. Another argument I keep hearing is that oil companies are entitled to these breaks. This argument seems to suggest that the wealthy and powerful deserve what they get and that working-class families should know their place and know better than to ask oil companies to do their fair share as well. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in America, said, quote, "There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making the war, and we're winning." This bill says that even the most rich and powerful among us must do their fair share to help us reduce the deficit. Their high-priced lobbyists cannot stop us from doing what is fair and what is right. Now, some in the industry have also claimed that cutting $2 billion in annual oil subsidies to the big five oil companies will somehow make oil and gasoline more expensive. That argument is absolutely false. This bill would save taxpayers $21 billion over 10 years, roughly a little over $2 billion per year. Compare $2 billion in taxpayer subsidies to the projected anywhere between 125 and 144 billion in profits the Big Five oil companies are expected to make this year. So if the Big Five oil companies could just live with $142 billion in profits in 2011, they could pay their fair share in taxes, help lower the deficit, and not raise the price of gasoline. Let's put it in a different way. The Finance Committee recently went through the corporate filings of the Big Five oil companies and found that their cost of extracting oil is about $11 per barrel. When oil is trading at nearly $100 per barrel, it is simply absurd to suggest that the cost oil companies are facing is what determining the price of oil, that cutting $2 billion per year in the subsidies will somehow force oil companies to raise prices. In addition, the nonpartisan Congressional Research Service just came out with a definitive report echoing the sentiments of countless economists and other disinterested observers, concluding that my legislation would not increase gas prices at all. So, Mr. President, it's time for the Big Five to do the right thing for a change and pay their fair share. It should not be hard, since in 2005, the CEOs of some of the Big Five oil companies testified that they agreed with former President Bush that they do not need subsidies to drill for oil when it's selling at $55 per barrel. Well, it's selling at nearly $100 per barrel right now, so it's quite strange that anyone thinks they need government handouts to drill when the marketplace is driving them that way. We simply cannot expect the average working family to shoulder the burden of lowering the deficit alone, and I hope some of the favorable comments I've been hearing from my Republican colleagues in recent weeks means they're ready to join in this effort and lower the deficit, because all of the saving goes directly to deficit reduction under the legislation, and do so in an equitable and effective manner. What's fair is fair, but nothing about continuing the subsidies is fair. Now, those on the other side would end Medicare as we know it in the name of deficit reduction, while continuing to pump billions of dollars in corporate welfare into a $100 billion profit industry. That's the height of hypocrisy. It's not fair to working families. It's not a wise use of limited federal resources. And if this body does the right thing today, it's not going to continue. There's nothing fair about the suggestion of ending Medicare in favor of big oil subsidies. Big oil has to do the right thing by America. They can be part and should be part of the solution to our deficit challenge, and that is the opportunity that we have today. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Alaska.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask consent that I be recognized for up to 15 minutes and that the following list of Republican speakers be recognized for up to 10 minutes each, not necessarily in this order, but the senators to be recognized would be McCain, Chambliss, Cornyn, Barrasso, Paul, Hatch, Hutchison, and Vitter.
Is there objection? Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have also come to the floor today to speak about the proposal to raise taxes on the 5 largest domestic energy producers. And I think it's important that we remember that we are speaking about 5 energy producers, 5 oil companies. We're not talking about a tax proposal that is broad and wide and encompassing. We're talking about a proposal to raise taxes on the 5 largest domestic energy producers. And I have to admit that I had some hesitation about even engaging in this floor debate at all, because I think we recognize that the words and the statements that we're delivering here are just that. They're just talk. They're just words. This proposal is designed to fail, but in failing, it is designed to score some political points, and it seems like that's where we are today. But as a senator who represents a state like Alaska, a oil and gas producing state, a state that would clearly be hurt by this proposal, I am obligated to outline why I feel that this is so deeply flawed. So I want to start by really stating the obvious here. This legislation will not reduce energy prices, but if anything, it will increase our energy prices. It will not substantially reduce our deficit or our debt, but if anything, it will add to those burdens by shutting off production and forcing the government to forego production revenues. And I think it's important that we put this in context because people around the country, as they're looking at the price at the pump go up day after day, they're saying, what are you doing in Congress to lower the prices? What are you doing to deal with the higher price of gasoline in this country? And I think it's important that we recognize that this legislation that we have in front of us does nothing to reduce our energy prices. And it's not just me that says that. The chairman of the Finance Committee has indicated that. We've heard several members on both Republican side of the aisle, Democrat side of the aisle, say this is not going to reduce our prices. So what exactly is it that we are seeking to do with this other than send a message? This proposal, I think it's important to recognize, will hurt poor and working families across our country. We all know what the price of gas is in our respective states. I will remind my colleagues that as much as Alaska benefits from high prices of oil as we are a producer, it is a fact that it kills us as in our local communities, in our economies, because we are the state with the highest gas prices across the country right now. There was a news story just last week back home in Kotzebue, which is the northwest region up in the state. They're paying $7.55 in Norvik, $8.25 in Kobuk, $8.95 in Ambler. I was in Fort Yukon a couple weeks ago. There they are at a $5, $6, $7 gas figure, but the spring barge, which will be coming in about 4 or 5 weeks now, will be delivering fuel at prices that were set some weeks ago, and people have been alerted that on the day that the barge delivers the fuel, the price will go up at the pump $1 additional. We're not talking cents here. We're talking an additional $1 to the people in Fort Yukon. So we know very well what high prices mean to us, and our constituents are asking us to do something about it. What can you do to lower those prices? To develop a coherent energy policy that starts to work now and then yields progress over time. Our constituents are not asking us to make this problem worse, and yet that is precisely what these proposed tax increases will do. Now, I heard my colleague here say that, no, this is not designed to increase the prices that are out there. Well, it might not be designed to do that. But that's what we can expect if, in fact, these tax increases do go into play. Now, it's been a few years since I got my degree in economics, but even though it was more than a few years ago, I do remember some of these very early entry-level classes that I took. And I remember learning that raising taxes on something is going to tend to make it more expensive. And I remember learning that when you tax something, you tend to wind up with less of it. That's just basic economics. And I think that there's at least some understanding of these concepts around here, because I don't see anyone that is proposing to raise taxes on solar panels or raise taxes on wind turbines to bring down their costs. The reality, Mr. President, is that this proposal, and I believe the point is conceded even by its supporters, this proposal will not cause gasoline prices to drop. Instead, it could very well cause them to rise. And I understand the memo from the Congressional Research Service suggests that no significant impact on prices will be seen in the short run. But that is the key phrase here, in the short run. Because what we need to be doing is looking longer term than next week or next month. Whenever corporations face increased costs, they've got a responsibility to their investors to recover those costs wherever possible. And usually what happens is they pass them on to the consumers. And to the extent the costs of this proposal cannot be passed on, these companies will simply have less to invest in new projects. Now, that's kind of talking about what happens or what doesn't happen with the price of gas. But this proposal is also not about reducing the debt either, and I think it's important to put that in context here. At best, it may be a drop in the bucket. According to the CBO, the President's budget for fiscal years 2012 through 2021 would result in nearly $9.5 trillion in new debt. This proposal, assuming that it has no negative economic impact, would raise $21 billion, or about 0.2% of that debt. We'd still need something like 450 times more revenue just to break even, never mind the $14 trillion debt that we've already incurred. We all know that we hit that debt ceiling yesterday, so it really does cause you to wonder, is this the best that we can do when we're talking about balancing the federal budget? Now, I understand that this proposal is not all that it will take, and no one is proposing that it do so. But I think it is important that we be honest with the American people when we talk about what this would mean in terms of a reduction to the deficit. And if we're being honest with each other, we're going to see this proposal for what it is. Essentially, a yes vote tonight to raise taxes on oil and gas companies is simply a vote to try and take a pound of flesh from these 5 major companies that, yes, in fact, are making money, yes, in fact, are making a profit. A no vote on this proposal tonight is a vote to try to keep our prices under control, and it's a vote to help preserve America's competitiveness within the global economy. Now, I also want to take just a moment here to kind of set the record straight on subsidies. There are no payments from the federal government to the major energy producers, as some have implied. Past Congresses have decided that those companies, and most other companies in America, I might add, deserve certain tax reductions. And this is a critical distinction here, because we haven't decided that the federal government should actually give more to these companies. What we've decided is that the federal government should take less from them. Now, if that's the same as a subsidy, then new homeowners are direct recipients of subsidies because we deduct mortgage interest payments. And that means that almost every company in our country, whether it's a Hollywood studio or the New York Times, whoever it is, that almost every company then is somehow or other subsidized. Now, if we're talking about leveling the playing field by eliminating all of the incentives within our tax code, especially in the context of broader reform that makes our tax code simpler and more fair, I welcome that discussion, and I think many in this chamber do. It would be a much different conversation if we were considering a reduction in the corporate tax rate. But instead, we're here debating whether or not to give different tax treatment to essentially punish a handful of companies in just one sector of our economy. And really, there's no policy justification for it other than that they can afford it. They're making money. They can afford it. So I would ask my colleagues, is this the kind of business climate that we want for the United States? And I really have to wonder then, if the answer to that is yes, who the next target will be if making large profits signals to Congress that you should be taxed at a higher rate. In reality, domestic energy producers are already amongst the most heavily taxed companies here in this country. While the effective tax rates for all corporations averaged 26.5% last year, the oil and gas industry's tax rate was at a much higher 41%. Instead of being subsidized by the federal government, the industry is actually a very large taxpayer. The federal government taxes gasoline at a rate of 18.4 cents a gallon. It also receives billions of dollars each year in non-tax revenues from the industry. Producers must pay the government for the rights of each of their leases. They've got to pay the annual rents. To hang on to those leases, they pay the royalties on any production that ultimately results from them. So in terms of what is paid out, according to one estimate, the oil and gas industry's total payments to the government amounted to $86 million per day in 2010. Now, I would also remind my colleagues that the President has established a goal of cutting oil imports by 3 million barrels a day by 2025. If we intend to achieve that goal, which is a good goal, raising taxes on domestic oil production just defies the logic here. To reduce imports, we will need to increase our domestic production. And that won't happen if we impose a hostile tax environment for the companies that operate here, companies that are already challenged to produce the oil and gas resources that we know we have, but we haven't been allowed to explore. Now, before I conclude, Mr. President, I want to mention an article that recently appeared in the Financial Times. It noted that in 2011, this year, OPEC nations stand to take in more than $1 trillion from exporting oil. Our nation, the United States, will provide a pretty good share of that money, likely tens of billions of dollars. And what do we hear about it? Nothing from the people who are proposing these tax increases. Nothing about the tremendous sums of money that we send overseas each year for foreign oil. Just the far smaller sums that could be collected from domestic companies through higher taxes. That's missing the forest here, Mr. President, to cut down the one tree that just happens to be growing in our line of sight. So here we are. Instead of doing everything that we can to halt the hemorrhage of American dollars to foreign countries, the Senate is now focused on an effort to raise taxes on 5 companies who actually operate here. The day after we hit the debt ceiling, we're debating a measure that would hardly make a dent in our debt. We're on pace to spend trillions of dollars outside of our economy in the years ahead, and we're on pace to incur trillions in federal debt. But so long as a few companies pay higher taxes somehow or other, it makes us all feel better. No wonder the American people have lost so much faith in the legislative process here. No wonder so much blame for high energy prices is placed on the federal government. The proposal before us today is not an answer for high gas prices or the federal debt. It is more likely to raise our energy prices, reduce our nation's oil production, and deepen our annual deficits. I had hoped that we would have a good, a substantive, a reasoned debate, discussion about how we're going to solve all these problems, but instead we're left to debate a measure that is all but certain to fail. I think that the Senate can do better than that. We will have debate tomorrow about the Republican alternative, a bill that, while it's not perfect, will increase production, generate revenues for the government, create new jobs, improve the safety of our offshore operations. If we're looking for good policy, Mr. President, I think that's where we need to start. We've got a long ways to go, but what we have before us today, I think, is unfortunate. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President?
Senator from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. What is the order? What is the order? Don't do it till I ask you.
There are 4 hours of debate equally divided on the question of S-940.
No, is there a specific time limit? On each individual senator?
Sorry? The majority leader has 107 minutes remaining.
Okay. Well, I would ask for as much time as I might consume, probably less than 15 minutes.
Without objection, so ordered. Senator is recognized.
I want to say the senator from Alaska does an excellent job of representing the oil companies. She puts forward the oil companies' arguments magnificently. She's real good at it. And she was an economics major, and so was I. And she said what she learned at her time, and let me tell you what I learned. I learned that corporate welfare is wrong. That corporate welfare to companies that are on the Fortune 500 list, particularly wrong. ExxonMobil, number 2 on the Fortune 500. Excuse me if I don't cry for Exxon. Forgive me if I shed no tears for Chevron. They're number 3. And forgive me, ConocoPhillips, you're number 5, but you're working on it. I'll tell you who I shed tears for, my people at home, who are having to pay ridiculous prices and who also have to face a federal deficit and are looking to us for leadership here. And leadership requires us to say, how long do you have to give corporate welfare to oil companies who've been getting it for 40 years, count them, 40 years, and they're so huge, they're multinational, they're multi-billion, and I'll get into what their people earn, what their CEOs earn in a minute. So I learned that corporate welfare is bad, it distorts the market, and to compare the tax deductions big oil has with home mortgage deduction, it gets right under my skin. Because the people who benefit from the home mortgage deduction, primarily the middle class of this country. So don't come here and compare home mortgage deduction with corporate welfare for the biggest companies in our country. So when are the defenders of big oil going to decide how much corporate welfare is enough? And when are the defenders of big oil going to answer this question? How high does the deficit have to go before you're willing to step up to the plate and end corporate welfare for the biggest corporations that are cleaning our clocks all the way to the bank? I would hope the time is now, and I'm going to try to lay out in a series of charts why I believe that. So let's go with the first one. First of all, we see the first quarter profits, ExxonMobil, $10.7 billion, a percent increase from last year, 69%, Mr. President. And I'm supposed to cry for them? I don't think so. BP, with all their troubles, corporate profits, $7.1 billion. This is just in the first quarter, Mr. President. Up 17%. Shell, up 30%. ConocoPhillips, up 44%. Chevron, up 74%. And yet big oil has the defenders on this floor saying, wah, wah. We cannot allow them to pay their fair share. Well, I got to tell you, we've got a deficit problem, and if we can't ask the wealthy few in this country to do their share, I don't know where we're headed. Let's do the next chart. Let's cry for big oil, or let's not. $14.5 million, the average compensation for the big five oil company CEOs. That's 307 times the average salary of a firefighter. It's 273 times the average salary of a teacher. It's 263 times the average salary of a public officer, and it's 218 times the average salary of a nurse. So we actually have people in this United States Senate coming here not only to defend these corporations, but the CEOs who are crying to us that their companies can't pay a few dollars more to help us solve our deficit problem. And you know what? We could lose this vote. They're filibustering it. We need 60. Let the American people see who's on their side, or who's on the side of these corporations. The effective tax rate for Exxon, 18% on their $7.7 billion in income. A family of two teachers have an effective tax rate of 19%. Can you believe this? And we've got people coming to this floor crying for the oil companies when they pay an effective tax rate less than a family of two teachers. ExxonMobil, 18% on their billions. A family of a truck driver and a dental hygienist, 19%. So the effective tax rate of these humongous multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations is less than our middle-class families. And people are coming here to cry tears for these oil companies. And they were whining in front of that committee. I mean, they may be really nice people, but they're out of touch. I agree with that. I think that was Senator Rockefeller who made that statement. What we could do with the $21 billion over the next 10 years. We could continue these handouts, this corporate welfare to big oil, or we could fund the entire COPS program for all those 10 years, and we could also provide after-school care for 2 million kids. So I'm asking people, would you rather have a cop on the beat at home and know that our police are out there and they're protecting our families? Would you rather make sure that 2 million kids are kept off the street and have quality after-school programs? Or would you rather continue corporate welfare for these 5 corporations in the Fortune 500? 3 of them, the American companies, are in the Fortune 500. Is that right? Yeah. Now, we could also provide 10 years of Federal Emergency Management Administration disaster relief. And we're looking across this great nation of ours, and we're seeing flooding, evacuation, sandbagging, all the problems, typhoons, hurricanes. And we know in California about earthquakes. FEMA, they're running out of money. Would you rather make sure that they're ready for the next disaster, or would you rather continue corporate welfare for these 5 corporations? You've got to answer that question, America, because it doesn't look like we're going to win this one, and these are issues you have to decide when you vote. That's the beauty of this country. People make a decision when they vote. If they agree with Senator from Alaska that these 5 big oil companies still need corporate welfare, they know who to vote for. What we could do with $21 billion over the next 10 years, we could fund the Ryan White program, which handles the AIDS epidemic at the level the President requested, and get rid of that dreadful disease. Now, you heard sort of veiled threats from my colleague who is from Alaska, an oil state, and I fully respect her, just disagree with her entirely, but she has absolute right to say what she says, believes what she says. I think it's parroting what the oil companies say. That's fine. That's her option. But the Joint Economic Committee said repealing all subsidies would have no effect on consumer energy prices in the immediate future. So all those threats about they're going to raise prices. I ask you rhetorically, Mr. President, for all the years they've been getting all these subsidies, did they ever lower their prices? No. They haven't. The Congressional Research Service said a small increase in taxes would be unlikely to reduce oil output and hence increase petroleum prices. So the experts are saying nothing in this bill to make them pay their fair share is going to adversely impact gasoline prices. The former CEO of Shell Oil said, with high oil prices, such subsidies are not necessary. He said that in February. Their own people. Their own people. And yet when they come to the committee, they're all whining about it. Now, then you hear from those from the oil-producing states, well, we don't have enough rigs in operation. This administration is not drilling. Excuse me. There is such a thing called the facts. Let's look at them in this chart. We see more drilling than ever before. This administration is moving forward. The oil companies have over 40, how many acres? 40 million, is that right? 50 million acres of leased land and offshore that they could drill on today. And all they want is more and more and more. They want to come to California, drill off our pristine coast and threaten tens of thousands of jobs that we have in our fishing industry, our tourist industry. They don't have to do that. They are sitting on these leases. They are drilling many more. So let's just have the facts be part of the debate. And that's what I'm trying to do today with these charts, to lay out the facts. Now, how do we reduce gas prices? I had a press conference actually in an independent gas station, and the independent gas station owner was wonderful and said, I agree with you, Senator. There I was, coming out with this plan. Here's how we can reduce gas prices. End big oil subsidies and take that money, some of it, reduce the deficit, and take the rest and invest in alternatives. So we have alternatives, clean fuels, batteries that can run our vehicles so we don't have to have these automobiles that are gas guzzlers. Crack down on fraud and speculation. A lot of this increase is due to that. Use it or lose it, say to the oil companies. You own all these leases, drill on those leases. Release oil from the SPRO. We know the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has tremendous amount of oil. This is the time to tap it. The last time we did it, prices went down, Mr. President, 30%. 30%. Invest in clean energy and efficiency. Reduce exports. Can you believe that the producers right here in America are exporting their oil, some of their oil? Keep it home. Keep it home. We need it here. So that's a plan that we can take. But let me just conclude my remarks this way. In the land of the free and the home of the brave, we need to have some fairness in our lives. It's crucial. And all the talk about competition and we want competition, you don't have competition when you were looking at these huge companies, and my colleague from Alaska talks about comparing them to these little bitty solar companies that are just getting started. When companies are just getting started with a new technology, that's one set of circumstances. But when you give these tax subsidies like this to big oil, you distort the price of the commodity. You distort the price of the commodity, and you bring it down. And therefore, it's anti-competitive with other sources of energy. And, Mr. President, this is the moment. We are looking to cut the deficit. We are looking for ways to bring billions of dollars home so that we can get out of the red. And what could be more perfect than this opportunity? In the name of fairness, in the name of competition, in the name of deficit reduction, frankly, in the name of the consumer. Let's have some fairness. And let's not come down to the floor and compare these corporate giveaways to the mortgage deduction that our middle class so needs. And I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope that we will have the courage to vote to end this corporate welfare. Thank you very much. I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
That all the time not used be charged equally to both sides.
Without objection, sir.
I thank you, and then I note again the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Consent to end the quorum call.
Without objection, so ordered.
And, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 15 minutes. Speak for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, American families all around the country, certainly including Louisiana, are suffering as the price at the pump goes up and up and up. It does so just as we're trying to get ready to enjoy a little vacation time with our families, use more gasoline, maybe driving places. That's always tough. But it's not just a typical summer experience. This is worse than ever, and I have the sinking feeling more permanent than ever. Mr. President, I'm afraid this isn't a blip. This is a long-term trend, and it's really hitting American families in the pocketbook hard. It's hitting Louisianians in the pocketbook hard. At the same time, we see historic turmoil in the Middle East. We see so many signs that we need to get hold of our energy picture. So energy and the need for, among other things, increased domestic energy production is absolutely crucial. Mr. President, that's why it's so darn disappointing what we're going to do, or perhaps more appropriately, not do on this crucial subject in the Senate this week. First of all, it's disappointing because we're going to end up doing nothing. We're going to have some votes, we're going to have some debate that are more or less messaging votes, and nothing is going to come of it. And that's deeply disappointing because America needs leadership and action, not just posturing. But secondly, Mr. President, it's disappointing, in my opinion, when you look at the two proposals before us. And because I'm deeply disappointed in them, I'm going to vote against both of these proposals, the Menendez bill and the McConnell bill, although for very different reasons. Mr. President, the first vote, of course, will be later today on the Menendez bill. And I'm afraid this bill is just pure political demagoguery, attacking big oil because I suppose the author and some members think that's an easy target, and meanwhile doing nothing substantive about the real problem, providing no relief to Americans who are paying more and more at the pump. Now, Mr. President, the bill purports to do away with taxpayer subsidies to big oil, quote unquote. Let me give you the factual translation of that. The factual translation is to increase taxes on certain energy companies by disallowing them from claiming the same sort of deductions and credits that thousands of other American businesses and manufacturers can claim, some of which go back and are almost as old as the income tax itself. That's the factual translation. Let me also give you the translation of what it would do. According to nonpartisan sources like the Congressional Research Service, it would decrease gasoline supply and increase price at the pump. What a great result. You know, American families are suffering as it is going into the summer with historic high prices. And so it's being proposed on the floor, measures that would actually decrease supply and increase price, exactly the opposite of what we need. Now, Mr. President, I'm completely open to doing away with all sorts of deductions and exemptions and the like in the tax code. But we should do that overall, across all industries, across all groups in America, as part of fundamental tax reform. We shouldn't just demagogue the issue and target one industry and a few companies. The President's own Deficit Commission suggested that brand of fundamental tax reform. I agree with that general approach. Unfortunately, so far, the President hasn't led on that issue, perhaps because it would mean not just impacts on quote-unquote big oil, but maybe favored companies of his like GE might actually have to pay some taxes, or maybe gold mining companies in the Majority Leader Reid's state of Nevada would also have to sacrifice very, very attractive special tax benefits. So let's get serious about two serious issues, fundamental tax reform, and let's look at that and lead on that, and let's get serious about energy. Now, Mr. President, I also have to say I'm deeply disappointed with the McConnell bill. It does some positive things at the margin in terms of opening up access, but meanwhile, the very first section of the bill, the very first substantive section, which is Section 2, actually increases the regulatory burden in the permitting process. Now, I can tell you, living in the Gulf, we've been trying to slog through that overly burdensome regulatory process to let energy companies get permits to begin with. That process is already too burdensome, too cumbersome, too long. It's virtually shut down the Gulf, produced less energy, and thrown a lot of Louisianians and Americans out of work. We need to streamline that process. We need to accelerate that process not add any new burdens and any new hurdles in it. And unfortunately, Section 2 of the McConnell bill does exactly that. It increases the burdens and requirements and hurdles of even the new Obama regulations that have been put in place since the BP disaster. Specifically, since the BP disaster, the Obama administration has required containment plans to be presented and approved by the Interior Department before exploration plans and drilling permits are issued. This bill would go further than that and add a new layer and a new level and a new requirement that even before submission to Interior, these containment plans would have to be third-party reviewed. Again, I think this is a completely unnecessary extra burden, extra hurdle, extra layer of requirement. We need to make the permitting process smoother, more streamlined, more accelerated, not move in the opposite direction. Secondly, Mr. President, while the McConnell bill opens up a little bit more access, it's very modest. It doesn't touch the Eastern Gulf. It hardly touches the Atlantic. It doesn't touch the Pacific coast. It does nothing onshore, including in our western shale areas where there are enormous oil resources trapped in that western shale which we can access because of new and safe technology. So I'm also disappointed that the bill is so modest in terms of the increased access. Mr. President, so again, to summarize, this week is pretty darn frustrating for me. It's frustrating because we're not going to do anything. There's going to be a whole bunch of sound and fury in the end signifying nothing, all too common an experience here in the U.S. Senate. And secondly, when you look at the two specific proposals, they are darn frustrating. The first, pure demagoguery. The second, moving in the wrong direction in terms of the permitting process and not being big and bold enough in terms of opening up access. The United States, Mr. President, is the single most energy-rich country in the world, bar none. Only Russia even comes close. No Middle Eastern country, Saudi Arabia, anyone else, comes close to our overall energy richness, our resources. But we're the only country in the world, Mr. President, that puts 95% of all of those resources off limits under law. Says no, can't touch the Eastern Gulf, can't touch the Atlantic, can't touch the Pacific, can't touch Alaska offshore, can't touch ANWR, going to make it difficult in Western Shale. Over and over and over, we make it difficult to impossible to produce good, reliable American energy right here at home. And most recently, we've done that by virtually shutting down the only productive part of the United States in terms of energy, the Western Gulf of Mexico. That's what we need to change, Mr. President. We need to change that in a big way. Now, in closing, Mr. President, let me say I'm a proponent of all of the above. It's not either or. It's not just oil and gas, but it's also not just new, undeveloped, advancing forms of technology and energy. We need all of the above in a big way. And so let's come together around that common sense wisdom of the American people who favor all of the above. And let's start doing all of the above aggressively. But that surely has to include much more domestic production of energy, open access to all of these vast resources we have. We can do it safely. We need to do it to provide some relief to American families. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.